Wanted, highly educated, hardworking, ambitious go-getters to work long hours, 5 days a week, plus nights and weekends, for no pay. Unpaid internships have become common, necessary stepping stones to careers in competitive industries. But there's a growing wave of legal action against them. Last year, a former Harper's Bazaar intern sued Hearst magazines for back pay. In a different case from this year, a New York federal judge ruled against Fox Searchlight Pictures, saying 2 unpaid interns on the movie Black Swan should have at least gotten minimum wage. It's not just global brands and multinational entertainment giants who exploit their interns either. According to ProPublica, there are at least 15 pending lawsuits over unpaid internships in virtually every industry: healthcare, law, sports, fashion, and of course, government. Every summer in Washington, D.C., intern season brings an estimated 20,000 to 30,000 enterprising young indentured servants, interns, to Washington. It's one thing when for-profit corporations exploit their workers. It's quite another thing when the government does it. Take the White House as an example. They've been advocating for a higher minimum wage, and good for them, which, by the way, amounts to less than $15,000 a year. But at the same time, the White House offers summer internships that demand at least 45 hours a week and pay absolutely nothing. Now, I'm not great at math. I was never a math guy. But I think that's a little less than $7.25 an hour. This is more than a labor issue. Unpaid internships also perpetuate a class system that favors those wealthy enough, or rather those whose parents are wealthy enough, to afford to work for free. Those who can't have entire career paths potentially closed off to them. Luckily, a new organization is trying to do something about it. Joining us now from London is Mikey Franklin, former intern and founder of the Fair Pay Campaign, a nonprofit centered around ending unpaid internships in Washington, D.C. Mikey, thanks for joining us in the War Room tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with your personal experience. You went to Washington looking for a job, and you went, like a lot of people, with bright eyes, big ambitions. Tell us what happened to you in your experience.
Well, when I first went to Washington, D.C., I was lucky enough that I had savings and a supportive family. But I still found myself in an incredibly exploitative environment. I worked not 40-hour weeks, but sometimes 70-hour weeks, evenings, weekends, up to midnight sometimes, and always for no pay.
I was an unpaid intern, so this hits close to home. I remember the experience of being an unpaid intern in Washington. But there are people who are watching this who weren't interns in Washington. So for them and for the audience, describe what kind of work interns do, let's say, on Capitol Hill. Is it just fetching coffee and making copies, or is it something more?
There's a common misconception that interns are training or doing work that doesn't need to be done, but that's just not true. Interns are performing substantive work, particularly on Capitol Hill, like you mentioned. Interns are frequently doing important research and policy work that, if they weren't doing it, would have to be done by a paid employee.
The question of whether this is just a labor issue, this is something that I think is not spoken about, not really all that well understood in terms of how internships potentially structurally shift the work system to people who can afford to take an unpaid internship. I'll ask you the question. Are unpaid internships part of a larger class system that Washington uses to, let's say, reinforce the idea that if you have money, you can have opportunity?
You're absolutely right. There's a reason that too many people in too many positions of power look like us. If you've got to work for free to get ahead in politics or in journalism or in the creative industries like film and fashion, it's going to be a huge barrier to anyone that doesn't already have individual or family wealth. Overwhelmingly, people who do have individual or family wealth are white men, people from the upper classes. So every single time an advert goes up for an unpaid internship, we're slamming the door in the face of someone talented who can't afford to work for free.
Let me make the devil's advocate argument. What would you say to supporters of unpaid internships who claim they're great educational opportunities, and if employers had to pay interns even a pittance, it would eliminate these kinds of entry-level type, if you want to call them jobs, let's call them jobs, but they would eliminate these entry-level kinds of positions, thereby wiping out the possibility for that opportunity for somebody to learn on the job?
Well, every single time someone says to me, I don't mind working for free, what I hear is, I can afford to work for free. But ultimately, these positions aren't going to go anywhere. Like we were saying earlier, interns aren't just fetching coffee, and they're not doing make-work jobs. They're doing real important work in hundreds of industries, work that needs to be done. And so the work is going to need to be done whether or not the interns are being paid. So we're saying interns should be paid to make opportunity a reality for everyone.
Now, part of your experience, you helped organize a pilot program at NYU, New York University, that was aimed at stopping the Career Center at that university from advertising, even letting people know about unpaid internships. I'm curious, how was that received on campus from students who were aspiring for careers in various industries where there are these internships, where not only are where the internships are, but where they're a necessity?
Well, I want to emphasize that the petition wasn't started by me. It was started by a fantastic NYU student who was outraged by this issue. Her name's Christina Isnadi. And she reached out to our organization because she was fed up of being told that she had to work for free if she wanted to get ahead. She put a petition up on coworker.org. And within a few days, she'd received over 1,000 signatures from her fellow NYU students who recognize that this is an enormous problem, that opportunity in too many industries is only available to a certain class of person.
That's Mikey Franklin of the Fair Pay Campaign. Mikey, it's a hugely important issue. Thanks for raising the issue. And as you said, it's not just a labor pay issue, it's also an economic class issue. Coming up, we're going to switch directions, going to the South. Going to the South already feels like international travel to a lot of people. So why not make it a separate country? Author Chuck Thompson will join us next to explain his plan for Southern secession. We'll be right back.